Welcome to Fringe Element here on the 440 Sports Network. My name is Braden Gall, and you can follow me on Twitter at Braden Gall.
Mine is Aaron Dugan. You can follow me on Twitter at the Aaron Dugan or Instagram Aaron_Dugan.
Our guest today on the show, Stephen Lassan, college football extraordinaire from Athlon Sports. We'll get to his YouTube page as well. Make sure you check him out on the Twitter machine as well. Stephen, in the interest of full disclosure, I've worked with you for almost 2 decades now. It is a pleasure to have you on the show. We do our own other podcast that you guys can all check out, the Cover 2 podcast. Stephen, welcome. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. This is my first video here at home, my spacious kitchen. So I hope trying to continue that good run of guests you've had with Sam Pittman, Shane Beamer, Stephen Godfrey. So, let's keep it going.
Stephen, don't put any pressure on yourself, though, because you are literally, I call you like the walking sports encyclopedia. Braden and I obviously both worked with you, not me for 2 decades because y'all are older than me, but
wow.
You are a walking book of sports knowledge.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I probably care too much about college football, but maybe that's what makes this interesting.
I think we might all care a little bit more than we should.
Right.
So today on the show, we'll do almost exclusively a long discussion about the Athlon Sports Preview magazine, where they have every SEC team ranked, where you have them ranked, where we have them ranked. Of course, magazine's on newsstands now. Make sure you check that out. Of course, athlonsports.com. Buy your magazines right now as media days are approaching next week. We're going to dive into every single team and every single prediction, Stephen, why that was made the way it was. So we'll get into all of that again. Go support good journalism, pay for good journalism, buy a magazine. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube page, of course, for Full 40 Sports, as well as Stephen's, also at Stephen L. CFB. You can get to ours at 440 Sports, all the Twitter accounts, all the socials, all that great stuff as well. We've got a couple of bits of news. Apparently, the SEC is not pregnant, so we'll get to that in a second, as well as the Media Day attendees. That's out. We've got a boatload of coverage coming for you guys next week from Atlanta. And, of course, some Cruton news. The Volunteers absolutely dominating over the weekend in terms of recruiting and what that means, how the collective's working. And so we'll get to some news here before we get into all the Athlon stuff. But, Stephen, when we have a guest on the show, we normally put them to work.
Don't do this, Stephen.
And we say that Fringe Element Stephen is brought to you by
Jaspers.
There we go. You did it.
That's it.
That's all we needed.
Not only am I hoping to be a good guest, I'm also a very consistent listener of the show. So try to support, good, my 2 good friends here, a great podcast, and also trying to support Jaspers as well. So I'm just chilling today.
Parking is free. The menu is awesome. It's spectacular. The game room is there. Of course, across, they've got every sport in the game room. They've got the darts, the shuffleboard, the pop-a-shot, the air hockey table, the skee ball, all the great stuff. But also, if you're listening to us outside of Nashville and outside of the Middle Tennessee area, Four Top Hospitality, who owns Jaspers, of course, has all kinds of restaurants and locations across the Southeast, in Memphis and in Flowood, in Ridgeland, as I was supposed to say, Ridgeland, Mississippi, as well as Huntsville, Alabama. So make sure you check out some Four Top Hospitality locations across the Southeast. They do great work. Their food is amazing. I promise you will not be disappointed. Okay, so Athlon Sports, the magazine is out. Go buy it. We will discuss all of your predictions, Stephen, in just a second. But I wanted to get quickly here, as I believe Dennis Dodd and Matt Hayes reported this. I said this on all of the shows last week. I do not think the SEC is going to make any big moves. Neither is the Big Ten. Neither is Notre Dame. We're going to be a period of calm for at least those 3 entities. Right now, it's being reported that the SEC is totally fine to stay at 16, which, again, is sort of like me and my wife saying, yeah, we're not pregnant for now. That could change tonight or tomorrow. But for now, we're good with 2 children. We are staying at 2 children. We are not expanding. I don't know what you guys thought about the report. I think it makes total sense that the SEC is not expanding. I never thought they were going to continue to expand anytime soon. Stephen, we'll start with you. What did you make of that report?
Not surprising. I think that's where it's kind of been trending all along. Unless Notre Dame decided to join the Big Ten, then I think the SEC probably would have responded. I think the big question in the looming crisis for expansion and realignment is going to be what happens with the ACC down the road with the grant of rights in the 2030s. I think you talked about it last week. The teams that make sense, the North Carolina, a team from Virginia, Florida State, Clemson. So I'm not surprised. I think that's where it's always going to land, for really a couple of reasons. One is just there's just not many teams that add value to the SEC on the board. And there's really just no need to expand just to expand. The SEC can be very selective. So I'm not surprised. This is kind of where I thought it would land, absent Notre Dame deciding to do something.
I think we're all on the same page that unless Notre Dame, like you said, had made a big move, nothing was really happening. We do know that large things are on the horizon, but I am not surprised that we sat exactly where we thought we would be at 16. Not shocked.
No, and again, I think it's, listen, Matt Hayes, Dennis Dodd have done a great job reporting. It's not like, again, any knock on their reporting, but like the presidents want to stay at 16 for now is of course that's what it is. And so we'll see, as you alluded to, Stephen, in 2034, 2035, this all could be different and changed, as Jack Swarbrick has told us now for the better part of a year. So I guess that's newsy. I don't know. It's not super newsy, but I guess it is. So, all right, real quickly in recruiting, we'll get to media days and then into Athlon Sports. Huge weekend in recruiting around the country, but Oklahoma, future SEC school, got a bunch of commitments. I think 3 over the weekend. Georgia has like the best linebacking class in America. LSU got a linebacker and a wide receiver. 8 commitments in July for Brian Kelly. So Brian Kelly doing a great job. And Tennessee with 3 more big commitments over the weekend. Tennessee now a top 5 class. And I don't want to get into like, is this edge rusher from Missouri going to be the reason Tennessee is back? Like that, I don't really frankly give a shit. But what I care about is the job that the collectives are doing and what that is doing to our coaching practices. And Stephen, Aaron and I have talked a lot about this, that Sam Pittman is a different type of guy. He's just a ball coach. Josh Heupel is kind of coach dad. He gets to outsource recruiting to a collective to help him develop players. And he gets to focus on doing what he does best, which is drawing up an offense and like caring about his players. So I guess I wanted to bring this up to ask you guys a question just in general. Like, are we, as long as we have collectives and NILs doing a lot of the work for us, quote unquote, in recruiting, does that allow athletic directors and for coaches of different types, Mike Leach, Mark Stoops, Sam Pittman, Josh Heupel, does it allow more freedom for those guys to find higher levels of success?
I'll go first. I think it can. I think with NIL and collectives, I think no matter, if you're Kentucky or Arkansas or Tennessee or whoever, it's to your benefit to embrace all this because, it's going to be hard to close the gap to Alabama, Georgia, A&M, or LSU just by natural history and what we've seen in recruiting since, the 90s and 2000s. So you have to embrace every tool kind of at your disposal, but also keep in mind too that, the NCAA has the coaching caps and all that, being able to hire analysts, being able to hire more people in the off-field roles, like all those things can help programs, be able to recruit and you have more resources at your disposal. So I think to your point, the football guy, he doesn't, we've talked about, like Dan Mullen, he was very good at X's and O's, but he wasn't really into recruiting necessarily. So I think it can help those type of coaches because you can sort of, like you said, outsource some of your recruiting, and you can also hire extra coaches and extra analysts and everything you need to sort of enhance all your recruiting. So yeah, I think it can help. I would include Heupel in the ball coach category because I think it's pretty clear he's all ball.
Resources to me was the key word that you said there, Stephen, which is, that's kind of the difference between Alabama and a lot of the other programs and this fall off that we see between those elite programs in the country and then everybody that tries to fall in behind them. And at the end of the day, what collectives are doing is giving coaches and universities an opportunity to provide more to the student athlete. So we see coaches like Sam Pittman and coaches like Josh Heupel that, I guess those aren't great examples because the SEC does have more resources than anybody else in the country. But at the same time, it's just what can you provide to the student athlete? So a lot of times, guys, if they're going to Vandy and following their gut and saying, this is the best place for me, this is the best coaching staff for me, well, there's still a large chance that you're giving up a lot to do that. And so these collectives are, I think, helping coaches or the good guys, we'll see, helping everybody kind of close that gap because they're able to offer more to the student athlete. And at the end of the day, like when you're sitting in their living room, you're sitting in a living room with parents and kids, you're like, I'm the best fit, this is the best program, but now you don't have to just sell it based on, I'm the best coach for your kid, but also here's what I can offer you to make your kid's college experience easier, to make things easier on the family, financially, and all of that. So I kind of think that's the end of the day. where we are.
And to me, the biggest thing is that it like devalues the shyster. Like it devalues like the used car salesman, snake oil salesman that's just going to try to sell you and tell you anything you need to hear, and your mom and your uncle and your aunt and your best friend, anything you need to hear to come play for me. Then we have to de-recruit you. And if you do, like, I guarantee you, Josh Heupel doesn't have to do that. I guarantee you, Sam Pittman is the exact same guy in the meeting with the parents as he is once you get to campus. Like
Totally.
And so the difference is like Saban, and go back and listen to our interview with John Talty about his book about leadership, where like he is just 80% of his life every day is recruiting. And he's trained these assassins. We've talked about it. Kirby Smart, Mario Cristobal at Miami, Mel Tucker at Michigan, Lane Kiffin, or Michigan State, I should say. Like he's trained these assassins to go out and like be this insane recruiting guy and also be the great coach that you have to be. But it allows for the guy who doesn't have that, like, I'm a really good used car salesman. Like it devalues that guy.
Are you talking about Dan Mullen?
No, I think Dan Mullen's the opposite, actually. I mean, Dan Mullen's kind of an ass, but like, I don't think he's.
But he's
like,
not a used car salesman.
No, to me, it's James Franklin. Like it's James Franklin. That's what it is.
I wanted you to say it.
It devalues what makes James Franklin good is it devalues that. Because clearly James Franklin doesn't know how to handle in-game situations. like it's that thing that you can just feel when you're around somebody that's trying to take something from you. You know what I mean? Like that thing. You guys know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
You know, I think something.
I don't mind Franklin, but
I like Franklin. He just exudes salesman. That's all.
Well, I think maybe we're headed to a situation where, you know, we have these like sort of departments in college football, almost like the NFL. You have like a personnel department, you have to evaluate transfers, you have to evaluate recruiting. So I think it's just all this is just an evolution of what's a growing off-field staff for all these coaches. And certainly I think it can help, Mike Leach, especially at Mississippi State, if you can Kentucky, Mark Stoops, anything you can do to close that gap, just because from natural and history perspective, I mean, it's going to be really difficult to out-recruit Georgia, Alabama, A&M, and LSU. So you have to take advantage of all this stuff and find ways to close the gap the best you can.
How about this? I'll stop. I will apologize profusely to James Franklin, and I'll say Butch Jones.
There you go.
Shyster, noun, a person, especially a lawyer, who uses unscrupulous, fraudulent, or deceptive methods in business. It devalues the NILs.
That helps me because I don't know Butch Jones.
It devalues the shyster element that can come up through coaching. That's what this does to me.
I know what you meant. Yeah.
It allows a guy to just be a guy, just be a real human, build a real culture with real people, draw up real plays, and then let the collective do all the shystering. Let them do all the work.
There you go.
They were good. And I think it's good for coaches and good for college football. So, all right. I just wanted to get that out of the way. Volunteer. Like, I don't know why I'm driven nuts by this.
Driven nuts by this?
I'm driven nuts by this. I'm being driven nuts. I don't know.
It drives me nuts that
the conversation around Josh Heupel's ability to recruit right now is being framed as, see, told you so. Josh Heupel can totally recruit. You guys were all wrong about this. And it's like, no, he has a collective writing checks for him and he gets to be himself. And that is outsourcing you know what I mean?
It's good timing.
Yeah. I mean, no, it's great for Tennessee fans. Like, it's great. By the way, Kentucky, Mitch Barnhart, what the hell are you doing? Why are you saying no collectives for us? Want no name, image, and likeness for us? What are you doing?
Kentucky would be one of those teams that would benefit from embracing it. Same thing with Arkansas too.
Yes, it's so ridiculous. I don't understand.
They would just continue the momentum that they've already built. It's like you could quickly, everything you've done in the last 10 years, you could quickly fall behind again if you don't jump on the bandwagon here.
All right. So just wanted to get that out of the way because I cannot stand how it's being framed. Like, oh, is Josh Heupel proving everyone wrong? All the doubters about his recruiting. Like, no, the rules changed.
Is the media getting on your nerves?
I hate the media. The media is so stupid. I hate the media. The media is like, oh, reports indicate the SEC won't expand for now.
To be fair, we are part of the media. So
I think that's why it's funny.
Yeah.
We're changing it from the inside, Stephen. That's what we're doing.
We're trying to. Yes.
All right. So the attendees at Media Days, by the way, great coverage coming to you guys next week. We're going to have so much stuff for you guys on Fringe Element and on Athlon, by the way. So make sure you check out all the good stuff, all the YouTube page, the website, everything.
Please subscribe to the YouTube page.
There you go.
Very helpful.
And so a lot of stuff coming for you guys next week. The announcement was made Tuesday morning with the players. There will be 7 quarterbacks: Arkansas's KJ Jefferson, Alabama's Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson. I thought was interesting from Florida. You got Stetson Bennett, the champ, back again. Will Levis for Kentucky, of course. Obviously, you have Hendon Hooker for Tennessee. And then Mike Wright at Vandy, I thought was interesting, considering he might technically still be in a quarterback battle. So 3 underclassmen, only 3 freshmen and sophomores. Jack Beck, wide receiver for LSU. Cedric Van Pran, the offensive lineman for Georgia. He's one of the best players at his position in the country. And then Richardson. So I think some statements by coaches about their quarterbacks and some underclassmen there. I love the offensive lineman, Aaron. I know you do too. So what'd you guys see when you looked at the list of names that got 21 all SEC picks by Athlon will be in Atlanta next week?
Lassan, you got it.
Yeah, I think the first thing that jumped out to me was what Braden said, was Mike Wright for Vanderbilt coming to SEC Media Days. You know, I always struggle whether we should read too much into the list of attendees and what is said at Media Days. But I think it's interesting that Vanderbilt's bringing him because there is a quarterback battle there. So either he's, could be important, obviously, to just team leadership and captain status, but maybe it tells us something about the quarterback battle for this season. I love all the quarterbacks coming because I think you look at the SEC this year, 7 of the 14 starters are coming, or at least the quarterback that could be in the mix to start. But this is a great year for quarterbacks in the SEC. It starts with Bryce Young, the defending Heisman Trophy winner. The league is deep with Spencer Rattler, Hendon Hooker. So I love all the quarterbacks coming. It's a great year for that. Anthony Richardson as well. I just think just important for Florida. If Florida is going to exceed preseason expectations, it's got to be because of Richardson. So I think the fact that he's coming is probably a good sign for Napier in Florida.
I agree. I think overall it says a little bit about when you look at, kind of the lineup of which teams are bringing who. Man, Braden, I'm not good at English today either, apparently. Which teams are bringing who?
I'm driven nuts by your English.
Not very passive, that voice. Like you look at Kentucky and, like we just said, of course, they're bringing Will Levis, and then also, they're starting with their linemen, which makes sense for them. Just kind of shows you, it's like Mark Stoops, they're the senior leader, starting with fundamentals. You've got guys on each side of the ball on the line, and then you've got the quarterback. And then also same thing, when you look at the big picture for LSU, they've got 2 juniors and a sophomore coming. If you want that to say something about LSU, it could, which is just still trying to find their identity. And they're young. In terms of what they're going to be able to put together. I was wondering, and I meant to look this up.
Well, before you move, were you guys surprised that Jack Beck got on there as a sophomore wide receiver returning instead of Keyshawn Butte? Like, I thought that was odd, but I guess
it probably has more to do with just media poise.
I guess I'm surprised and not surprised. Yeah. Because if you go back to the spring, I don't know if there was a little bit of tension between Kelly and Keyshawn there. So I think it sounds like from everything going forward, things are going to be fine once we get into the season. But maybe I think bringing Jack Beck might be a little safer for LSU at this point.
Yeah, I thought interesting that 3 graduate seniors for Mike Leach, of course. Yep. Obviously, like I'm not going to bring, and oh, by the way, I'm going to bring a graduate wide receiver, Austin Williams, not the wide receiver that's a first team all SEC or second team all SEC pick.
Or no Will Rogers either.
No Will Rogers. Right. So like that's so on brand for Mike Leach. Like I'm fine with that.
It is interesting. It's just not always, when you look at these, you expect to see the biggest names, or it's an outsider looking in, you expect to see the biggest names and the most, well-known players. That's just not really how media days works. It also has a lot to do with who represents the values of the particular coaching staff or team or university the best, who's the most well-spoken, who's the most comfortable on camera. Some guys would want to do this and some guys actually wouldn't. I've seen guys try to get out of it before. And you just, it's a lot very quickly, which is why a lot of times if they have the opportunity, you see the upperclassmen.
All 3 quarterbacks on the Athlon team, first, second, and third team, Young, Hooker, Jefferson, all going to be there. Tank Bigsby, Layden Robinson out of A&M. You got Broker from Ole Miss, Derek Hall, of course, Will Anderson and Jordan Battle from Alabama, of course, all first team All SEC by Athlon Sports. Nolan Smith, first team All SEC by Athlon. You got Isaiah McGuire from Missouri, who's a second team All Player. BJ Ojolari from LSU, Jalen Catalon from Arkansas, Anaya Smith. I mentioned Van Pran, as well as Kenneth Horsey. You mentioned Aaron. So those are all the first and second team players. So there's a lot of talent there. But you're right. Every coach kind of handles it their own way. And I think the Mike Wright being in the middle of a quarterback battle. So whether he's got the job or keeps the job or doesn't keep the job, interesting that Clark Lee has decided he's worthy of being a spokesman for the team, which I think is great. And then I thought, I'm with you, Steven. I think Richardson, that's a signal that like, not only is he clearly the starting quarterback, in my opinion, but also as a sophomore, now one of the vocal leaders of the team. I thought Richardson was another one that really stood out to me. But again, a lot of this stuff we're going to cover next week on the show. So, but first team All SEC leads us right into the magazine, Steven. Athlon Sports. I'm going to start with the hardest one possible.
All right.
Why on earth did you pick Alabama to win the SEC?
I have to think and come up with a good answer for you, Braden, because I don't know. I mean, they only return the two best players in the country, Bryce Young and Will Anderson. They have the best coach in college football. They also nearly won the national title in what was probably not one of Nick Saban's best teams. How's that for astute analysis for you?
They are number one in the Athlon Sports preseason overall rankings, winning the national championship. You've got them going 13-0. Are we in store for, here's a real question for both of you guys. Are we in store for one of those, because we've had kind of this 2 or 3 years in a row, right? Where LSU 2019 offense, one of the best all time. 2020 Alabama offense, one of the best all time. 2021 Georgia defense, one of the best all time. Do we think Alabama's defense is going to end up in that same conversation or category, or is that a little optimistic?
As good as Georgia last year?
No, just historically good for Alabama's sake or whatever.
I don't know if I'm ready to say that. But I'll let the encyclopedia give us 2 cents.
I think, first of all, this defense is going to be very good. I know I'm stating the obvious here, but with Will Anderson back and they added Eli Ricks in the secondary at corner, to shore up some of the secondary concerns that they might have going into the season. So, I mean, from a positional standpoint, defensive line, linebacker, defensive backs, they rank in the top 10 nationally in all of our position units. So I don't think this defense will be as dominant as Georgia was last year, but still I'd put them top, 2 or 3 in college football: Alabama, Georgia, Clemson. I might be forgetting somebody, but those would be, my top 3 or so. But I think maybe the point that you're getting at is just in terms of balance. Like Alabama's got the explosive offense. They've got a dominant defense. Like this might be, we'll see where it ends up, but it could be a really balanced national championship team.
Right. And so you're saying that they might not be a record-breaking defense, but they also may not have to be.
Yeah. In
order to come out where they want to be at the end of the season. Yeah. I agree with that.
Who's more likely to lose a game in the regular season, Georgia or Alabama?
Man, it's a great question. I think I'd probably go Alabama.
Me too. And then Georgia will screw it up when it matters most.
It's because Georgia's schedule's easier, though. That's why, right?
Yes. I mean, Georgia has to play at Kentucky later in the season. They have to go to Mississippi State. So those games are going to be interesting. I think just the strength of the SEC West, Alabama going to Arkansas, A&M comes to Tuscaloosa. They have to go to Ole Miss as well. So I just because of strength of schedule, I would probably say Alabama.
I got lots of questions for y'all. Ready? Okay.
Yeah, man. Let's go.
So y'all have 3 teams ending 8-4. Tennessee. So in the East, you have Georgia on top, obviously. Then Tennessee and Kentucky, you both have it 8-4 and 4-4 in the conference. And you've got, as I'm sure you guys are familiar with, you're shaking your head like, yeah, we've looked at this 6 million times. Arkansas, LSU, and Ole Miss, you also have all 8-4 and 4-4. So first question, why Kentucky in front of Tennessee in the East? Just overarching big reason for that.
Yeah, I think
schedule?
The East is really difficult to sort out between, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Florida. I think Florida, we talked about Anthony Richardson. If Florida surprises this year, it's probably because Anthony Richardson ended up exceeding our preseason expectations. And Billy Napier in his first year, the defense and everything shows improvement there. I think Tennessee versus Kentucky is really interesting because Tennessee's got the tougher crossover going to playing Alabama, going to LSU. Kentucky, a little bit more favorable path. The game is in Knoxville. this year. So I like Tennessee to finish second over Kentucky, but it is really close as we have in the standings, both of them at 4-4. From a team strength perspective, and both teams have quarterbacks who could be all SEC at the end of the year. I think if you're Kentucky, you're looking at rebuild offensive line. How does the new offensive coordinator mesh with, Levis, a quarterback, combined with replacing Wan'Dale Robinson? So I almost, we have Kentucky in our top 25. I think it's a credit to Mark Stoops because they have all these questions. They lost defensive linemen. They've got question marks in the secondary, and we've picked them to finish 8-4 despite all that. So I think it's a credit to Mark Stoops and that staff to be picked in the top 25, and just shows you how far they've come in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I think the same thing would be for Ole Miss, right? To have 10 wins last year, to replace all those guys, and to be picked at 8-4 is a credit to where Lane Kiffin and where Ole Miss is at. Here's the thing: we've got Tennessee at 18, we've got Kentucky at 21, Tennessee second in the East, and I say we, meaning Athlon, and then Kentucky at third. I actually, now that I've spent about a month and a half thinking about it, I actually like Kentucky a little bit more now. Which I know Steven hates when I do this because we spend all this time picking the magazine, and then
he's like, for real.
And then I have buyer's remorse midway through the summer, and I go, I've been studying Kentucky a lot. Aaron knows how much I love Kentucky in general. They've got a really good class of 2020 recruits along that defensive line that are going to step into those roles. The quarterback is there. It's more about Tennessee than it is Kentucky, Steven. Tell me what you think about this. You are asking Hendon Hooker and that offense to be as perfect as last season, if not more perfect. And they've got to do it at Pittsburgh, at South Carolina, at LSU. And I still think they're going to be good. I still think they're 7-5, 8-4. I don't think they take this big step like Tennessee fans expect, because you are asking him to be perfect again and carry a defense. And that's asking a lot of any player, I feel like.
I think that's a great question, because first of all, if you go back and look at 2020 to compare it to 2021, and you look at Tennessee's stats, I think they averaged around 21 points a game in 2020, and I think 39 last year. So if you're asking that offense to take a step forward, it's into the 40 points per game category, which would mean the offensive line is a lot better this year. You have receivers outside of Cedric Tillman stepping up. I like Jalen Hyatt. I've been sort of on the Jalen Hyatt breakout train for the last couple of years. So maybe this is the year. They need Brew McCoy, of course, to step up too. Yeah. So I think that is a question I have with Tennessee's offense is, can they go to the next level? And I think on defense, they gave up over 200 rushing yards a game in SEC play. There's still some question marks about this group. I think they need more difference makers on this side of the ball to take a step forward in the national ranking. So I think that is a fair assessment about what's the next level and can Tennessee reach it on offense this year.
I know this is going to sound, I know this is oversimplifying it, but I know how many factors you guys probably took into account doing this. And just at first glance, I don't even know if you guys realize this, but in every head-to-head matchup, like Tennessee versus Kentucky and then Arkansas, LSU, Ole Miss, in all those head-to-head matchups, it looks like you guys could have just taken every team with home field advantage in the head-to-heads.
Yeah, I think I will admit I did that probably.
Well, I mean, it's fair. And then my brother, who's our producer, and I were talking beforehand. We're like, is it possible that maybe, or were they picking head coaches that would win in a cage fight? That would put Lane Kiffin in last. Although I do think Lane Kiffin would scratch and pull hair.
I would take Stan Pittman and Mark Stoops. Yep. Those would be the two I would take. I would take Stoops over Heupel. I would take Pittman over Kiffin and Kelly.
Fair.
Yeah, Sam Pittman over all of them.
Yeah, duh.
No chance I'm messing with that dude.
I think Kiffin would be very crafty. He might be underrated in this. Yeah, he might find, it might be a prankster, might be find some ways to overcome some other obstacles.
Yeah.
You know who'd be good?
Who?
First of all, Clark Lee is very in shape and very young, so he could probably outlast everybody. But Brian Harsin that dude is in shape, man. That dude is ripped up.
He's kind of scary too.
I would not mess with Brian Harsin.
Mm-hmm.
But his teams won't be in any of these games.
Lane Kiffin would just
I don't know if we should totally count out Auburn though.
All right, so
because we've seen this before.
I know. I want to get to Auburn, but I want to go back to A&M because they're actually picked higher than all of these other teams. They're fifth in the nation, 10-2 in the magazine, second in the West. why is this team going to be capable of avoiding the Texas A&M thing and get to 10 wins, in your opinion, Stephen?
I think the first thing is rising talent. We've seen what Jimbo Fisher has done on the recruiting trail, and of course, the number one recruiting class this year. I think some of those guys will get more involved as the season goes along, especially on the defensive line, where they're going to need to replace some guys that they lost, had some turnover there. I think the biggest reason for optimism, if you're A&M, is the quarterback room. It's in much better shape than it was last season. Once Haynes King got hurt, Zach Calzada stepped in. Of course, he had the out-of-body experience in beating Alabama in the regular season. But, Haynes King is back. Max Johnson transferred in from LSU. They added the freshman Wigman. So I think just in general, if you're looking at A&M, it's talent. It's the track record. We just saw them get on the doorstep of the playoff just 2 years ago. And then the quarterback room being better and being ready to deliver. So I think offensively, they will be better combined with a good defense once again. And that gets them into that 10-2 conversation to be in our top 5.
Also, if they can find their footing by the middle of the season, they have a pretty large stint of home games right there at the end. So if they can keep it together at the beginning of the season, they've got 4 home games in the last 5 weeks, which would help kind of solidify their place if they're towing that line. And then also they've already had to, this is a less tangible thing, but they've already probably had to quiet a lot of the noise around their program in the off season. So if they all have sometimes that really early preseason adversity, it can go either way. It can get really, really distracting, or if it's early enough and you rally in the right way, they can kind of just create this bubble around themselves. If they can carry that bubble that's quieted the noise throughout the season, then it might actually, all of this drama in the preseason might actually do them some favors.
I also think too, offensive line for Texas A&M, this should be one of the better groups in college football this year. There's a lot of young talent that's starting to fall into place there. So I think if you're A&M, you're sort of getting back to what worked in 2020. There's no Kellen Mond this year in terms of experience and production right now. But if the offensive line is better than it was, and you add in, A chain at running back, you got the ground game going, better quarterback play, dominant defense. I think early in the season, they play Miami in non-conference play, and they also get Arkansas in the neutral site game in Arlington. So I think early on, we'll find out how far along this quarterback room is. And I think some early tests getting ready, of course, for that big game in October 8th against Alabama.
Or they're pumping the noise into the loudspeakers at all times. Like it could be the other. Fisher could be doing the opposite of that, just try to motivate people for some strange reason. I think you have to make some, like when doing the magazine, you have to make some assumptions. All right. Like one of our assumptions is that Georgia will reload on defense in their front 7. Like that's an assumption. And by the time they get to Atlanta, well, that group, if we're going to pick them to get there, is probably pretty damn good. So they're going to give Alabama a hell of a game. We picked Alabama over Georgia in that championship game. They did it last year. Well, I don't know why they wouldn't be able to do it this year. But A&M's another one where you have to sort of just like, all right, if they're a 10-2 team and they're going to be top 10, we have to make some assumptions that the quarterback room worked out. Whatever happens, it worked out. Mm-hmm. I think you have to do that for a lot of different things when you do this magazine, Stephen, like Kentucky's defensive line, or, you look at some of the supporting cast around, the quarterback at Ole Miss, for example. Like you just have to sort of, that Brian Kelly is going to be automatically worth 1 win or 2 wins at LSU in terms of organization and leadership. And so that's why the offensive line is a little bit better. Like you have to make some assumptions about teams that are going to grow and evolve over the course of the season.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And also I think there's 2 factors that are very difficult to sort out now, is that rosters are older because of super seniors from the last couple seasons. And also you have the transfer portal, which it's not only just that you have transfers. We've seen that the last, for however many years, but it's the sheer amount of transfers and the way that these teams are bringing them in, like Ole Miss and USC are just bringing in so many. So how do you mesh all of that change with coaching changes and everything like that? There's a lot more, I think, variables in trying to make these predictions than we've had in recent years.
So, in addition to those, well, you have something else, Braden?
Well, no, if you're going to stay there, Aaron, stay here. I want to ask about Arkansas, Ole Miss, LSU, Mississippi State.
Mine can go anywhere. I just want y'all at some point, I want to know what y'all went head to head on the most when you were doing this, what y'all had the most back and forth on, but we could do that at the end.
No, that's a great question. Let's save that to the end. That's really good. Probably Oregon.
I can't really imagine, Steven, you like fighting. You'd be like, I actually disagree because I have a few reasons, and I think we should put so and so ahead.
Aaron, he doesn't even do that. Like, I'll just say like, I think this is blah 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 blah, and then he just goes, oh, okay, that's a good point, and then just does what he wants anyway.
I love that. That's what you got to do.
To be fair, I tried to work your predictions in as much as I could. You were late in sending them, and to be fair.
Oh, settle down. Oh,
there it is.
All right. So Arkansas, number 23 in our national rankings, LSU, number 26, Ole Miss, number 28, Mississippi State, number 30. What the hell? How did you sort those out? Because literally out of 130 teams, you've got all 4 teams within like 6 or 7 spots of each other. You could order them in any particular way. So explain your thought process on why you settled on Arkansas, LSU, Ole Miss, Mississippi State in that order, all between 23 and 30 nationally.
First of all, it's probably the most difficult decision that we had to make this year in the SEC predictions. I mean, the West is loaded, but not only that, I think it speaks to where this league is. I think the division certainly is deep in the middle. I think for starters, Arkansas, just recent track record, the turnaround under Sam Pittman, and also I think bringing back, KJ Jefferson at quarterback. They have one of the league's better quarterbacks. I think we know that this coaching staff can get the most out of the roster. They only return 9 starters, so they have some question marks, but I think that's trusting this coaching staff, trusting the quarterback situation to overcome some of those things. I also trust Barry Odom and Kendall Briles just to figure it out. Treylon Burks, losing him for Arkansas, is definitely going to be the biggest question. I think
are people talking enough about Jadon Hazelwood? I feel like people aren't talking about him enough.
Yeah, I think he will make an impact for Arkansas this year. I don't know that he will have the impact that Treylon Burks did, though. I think it may be more receiver by committee, if that makes sense for Arkansas this year. So
okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you there. You're on a roll.
Yeah, no, I think, the rest of the division is really difficult because I like LSU. I mean, roster talent's not a problem. I like the Brian Kelly hire. Just only 6 returning starters. I know returning starter data may cite it. It doesn't necessarily mean everything when trying to sort out these teams. But LSU has a big question mark at the offensive line. The quarterback position is a little unsettled too. I think they have options. I think it's going to be a matter of just figuring out whether it's Nussmeier, whether it's Brennan, whether they go with Jaden Daniels as the full-time or whether he plays in sort of a change-up role. I think LSU is the one team that will probably get better from game 1 to game 12 and probably get more dangerous as the season goes along. Ole Miss is really tough to figure out. There's just so many transfers. There's so much unknown on the roster, but there's also a lot of upside. The schedule's pretty favorable. If Jackson Dart settles in at quarterback, they've got the weapons at running back, receiver, good offensive line. I think losing DJ Durkin as defensive coordinator is a pretty big deal. That defense got a lot better last season, went from the bottom of the league to somewhere in the middle. So they have some questions, but they're also probably the biggest wild card, just trying to piece together that team. I like this Mississippi State team. I think that's indicated by our preseason ranking in the top 30. The problem is the schedule is just so difficult when you have to play Georgia and when you have to go to Kentucky in crossover play. You go to Ole Miss as well. So they bring back a lot of returning experience. Will Rogers, of course, one of the league's better quarterbacks. The biggest question, I think, is how they fill out that offensive line with Charles Cross gone to the NFL.
So you guys have Auburn going 6-6. And so what's the Auburn blew, and y'all talked about this in the magazine too. Auburn blew a bunch of close games or winnable games at the end, like in the second half, over and over, week after week, last season. What is it going to take for them to win those close games, and how much more? I mean, obviously they were already relying heavily on Tank Bigsby. But how does that change? Do they have to now shift their whole game to really let him be the focus? And then how do they win those close ones?
Yeah, I think he has to be the focal point of this team. I think it is the running game and it is the offensive line for Auburn. If they're going to take a step forward in the West, it has to be on the ground game and an experienced offensive line. But it has been inconsistent the last couple of years, because I think when you look at this team in a very broad sense, the defense should be good. They have lost some guys to the transfer portal, but I think the frontline talent is very good. So I think you combine running game with a good defense. That's the formula to try and finish higher in the West. I think the problem for Auburn is they're very much on the sort of the margins. The quarterback play for this team will really dictate how high they can climb in the West, because you compare Auburn to the other teams they're battling. KJ Jefferson is at Arkansas. You have Will Rogers at Mississippi State. I think you feel good about Texas A&M's options. So the quarterback room for Auburn is a big question mark. And I think whether it's Calzada, whether it's Finley, whether it's Ashford, whichever one of them wins that battle, how they perform is going to kind of decide how high that Auburn climbs this season. Because to me, they look like a team that's going to be good on the ground, good on defense, but quarterback play in a league where these teams are close, they're going to need the quarterback room to be better than they were at the end of last season. And I have major questions about it.
Braden, real quick, is 6-6 for Auburn generous, conservative, or spot on?
I think no, they'll either be 0-8 or 9-3. Like, it's not like but again, that's how they work, and they'll be picked 7th. And again, we went through this a couple weeks ago on the episode where we talked about second-year coaches. Like, Brian Harsin is betting on himself. He's got a hell of a running back, a good offensive line, a good defense. He is betting on himself and his guys that he picked at coordinators to elevate the quarterback in the offense. And if they do that and they can fix it, then they play 5 games. They could start the season 5-0 maybe at home. Like they could also go 0-8. So like, I have no clue.
They had eight home games as well.
Yeah.
So the schedule for a coach that's on the hot seat already, the schedule works out great early on. It's just that, when you're talking about a division that is so close, if you can't get better quarterback play at the end of the year, from what we saw last season, it's going to be really hard to win some of these battles against these teams that are all kind of clustered together.
This is peak preseason Auburn. Like, this is coaching turmoil, but some things we like, but some things we don't like. A game against Penn State that could ultimately decide his entire future. Like, they could either curb stomp Penn State or just get destroyed. Like, we have no idea what Auburn's going to do. Florida's at 33. We talked about them just a little bit. Stephen, Athlon has South Carolina at 42, Missouri at 53. And then I'm still looking, you got to go all the way down the list to 94 to find Vanderbilt. So clearly 3 very different tiers there, in your opinion, between those 3 teams.
Yeah, I think so. I think there should be reason for optimism at South Carolina because of the way they've used the transfer portal. The skill talent is better. Also, Spencer Rattler transferring in a quarterback, I think he'll make an impact right away. The quarterback room's already in better shape than it was last year for South Carolina when they were, just pulling guys off the graduate assistant route on the coaching staff. So I like the way they finished last season. I still think offensive line, defensive line is a question mark for South Carolina. Line of scrimmage, especially in the SEC, you're going to be a concern here. But I like the addition of Rattler, and I think he'll give that offense a spark. I think for Missouri, the question is, defensively, they were better down the stretch last season after they made some coaching changes. Does that hold up this year under a new defensive coordinator in Blake Baker? You also have the quarterback uncertainty too. I think Brady Cook played pretty well in the bowl game. Like, is he the guy going forward? And I think for Vanderbilt, really, it's all about 2023, 2024. It's about finding pieces that you can develop this year as freshmen and sophomores looking to the future. I mean, Vanderbilt only had one SEC game decided by one score last season. The non-conference schedule was also difficult too, going to Hawaii and at Northern Illinois. So I think if you're Vanderbilt, it's just about showing progress and start to find some pieces that you can continue to build on over the next couple of years, because it was not supposed to be a 1-year or 2-year fix for Clark Lee.
No.
All right, before we get to Stephen, where I argued with you and you just ignored what I had to say, and we'll find out where we disagreed the most. I'm curious, where do you think where do you think Athlon is most vulnerable to get something so wrong here, outside of Auburn, because Auburn doesn't count?
Yeah, I think it's probably somewhere in the SEC West. I think if we miss on any of these teams, and we're going to be probably wrong to some extent at the end of the year, but I think somewhere in the SEC West, it's, even though Mississippi State has a difficult schedule, maybe the experience, the 3rd year under Mike Leach, everything just connects and they finish much higher. Maybe they finish 3rd in the SEC West. I think when you look at the East, I think Florida is the team maybe that has, some upside there, because if Anthony Richardson, if he can translate that big playability that he had last year in the limited snaps to over a full season with Billy Napier leading that offense, then I think Florida could easily exceed preseason expectations. I think even looking further down the East, I'm intrigued by South Carolina just because all the new pieces, how does it all come together with the momentum that they finished at the end of last season? So I think there's certainly the tiers of the SEC are clear to me. I feel good about Georgia and Alabama. I think the middle where, we've talked about Arkansas, LSU, Tennessee, Kentucky, like that's where if we miss, it's probably going to be that order is going to look a lot different at the end of the year.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think we're kind of used to, at least in the East, there being 3 chunks in terms of like teams and their capabilities. And now it's like clear front runner, Tennessee and Kentucky. And
I would put Florida with those 2, honestly.
You would?
Yeah, I would put those 3 on their own tier.
Everyone probably would too.
Everyone loves South Carolina, and I am not as high on South Carolina yet. With all due respect to our previous guest.
And then you get down, and then there's obviously someone that's clearly at the bottom. So it's like there's more like 4 chunks rather than 3.
A thought on South Carolina, if I could. I think South Carolina, it's very possible that they are a better team this year than they were last year. It just may not show a whole lot in the record because the schedule's difficult. So at the end of the year, they could be 7-6, but they were a better team this year than they were last year. But the schedule's just too difficult to show massive improvement.
Yeah, I could see them being 5-7, missing a bowl, and being a better team.
Very possible, yes,
than last year for sure. All right, Stephen, where in your opinion, in the SEC and then elsewhere, did we disagree the most?
Yeah, this is
where I said, you know what, I really like this team, and you disagreed with me, and then eventually just went with your own decision.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that you did like ignore Braden at the end.
One of us had Kentucky second in the East last year. One of us had Kentucky number 2 in the East last year.
I'm sure Stephen was right about a couple things also.
Yeah.
Valid.
You did have Kentucky second in the East last year. Yes, I will give you that. Although I think that prediction came later in the summer, so it was a little late to get in the magazine.
Irrelevant.
Someone's taking notes.
Yeah. I think where we disagreed the most in the magazine was probably the number 4 playoff spot. I think it's, I went with Clemson. I think if you gave me Clemson versus the field, I would probably pick the field this year. But at the same time, it's really hard to sort out, much like we did the West, like these teams that are all clustered really close together, 4 through 13. I think in the SEC, I think Braden likes Mississippi State higher than I do. I picked them 6th. But I also see it. But it's also when you're getting into 4-4, 3-5, for 3rd, 4th, and 5th in the West, the schedule at some point just became too much for me to pick them higher. So I don't know, Braden, you disagree with me?
No, I agree with your disagreements. I don't think there's anything you'd probably change, right, about the magazine a couple months later. Like, I don't know. We'll see what my ballot looks like in Atlanta next week, but I don't think you'd change anything, right, as of right now.
SEC?
Yeah,
no.
SEC. Yeah.
I think so. National, like the 130 at 131. I think I would have made some tweaks.
Yeah. Steven's talking about like how he would have moved Troy up like 3 spots from like 92 to 88. And
hey, Steven.
And no one can argue with him on that.
It's okay. It's going to be okay.
It's going to be fine. Okay. Well, Steven, tell everybody where they can follow you, where they can watch your videos, where they can buy a magazine.
Yes. So athlonsports.com is where you can pick up a magazine, go to our online store. Any cover, we can ship it to anywhere in the country. So that's a great thing. If you're an Auburn fan living in North Dakota and you can't find the cover, go to our online store. Also, the SEC and national magazines are on newsstands right now. And if you go to athlonsports.com, you can see all my writings and realignment and preseason takes to there. You can follow me on Twitter at AthlonSteven. Check out the YouTube page is Stephen L. CFB. Also on Instagram, Stephen L. CFB.
Braden's showing them off for the YouTubes.
There's some Will Levis for you BBNers out there, baby.
Anthony Richardson.
Anthony Richardson.
For some Mayo, for the Mayo lovers of the world.
For the mayonnaise
and Stephen
lovers,
Lassan. Don't come at Lasso if he messes up any of the rankings from the 124th spot down.
Yeah. After 82, just forget about it. It's fine.
Leave him alone.
It doesn't matter.
I actually had some remorse yesterday because I was getting the 131 ready to post on the site, and I found a few teams I think I may have missed on. So
I'm telling you, Troy should be hired. Defense,
Old Dominion probably should be.
I was going to say you were sleeping on the Monarchs, man, the whole time. So all that great stuff, of course. Aaron, where can people find you?
The Aaron Dugan on Twitter and Aaron_Dugan on Instagram.
You can get to me at Braden Gall, and of course, find me at Jasper's, your neighborhood watering hole over on West End, with free parking, the next evolution of the sports bar with an elevated menu. and wonderful locations all across the Southeast. So all you SEC fans, make sure you check out Four Top Hospitality.
The highest ranked sports bar in the Southeast.
Yes, they all of Jasper's locations make the playoff. All of them. Amerigo, Char, etc. There's a 6-team playoff, and all 6 teams make the playoff for Four Top Hospitality. They're in Flowood, Ridgeland, Memphis, Huntsville, Nashville. Go check them all out. We do appreciate their support. And so therefore we appreciate your support. Check out the YouTube page as well at 440 Sports, on the Twitters as well. For everybody, for Steven, for Aaron, I'm Braden. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll talk to you live from Atlanta next week. This has been Fringe Element here on the 440 Sports Network.